The military power of the Chinese Dragon is growing rapidly. This is especially evident at sea. Here, one disappointing news for the U.S. and the entire West follows another. In 2021, China surpassed the United States in the number of warships, 340 units versus 290 units. In 2022, the Middle Kingdom increased its military forces to 370 ships. Yes, the U.S. is still noticeably ahead of its main geostrategic rival in terms of the total tonnage of warships. It's also ahead in terms of combat potential. Still, 11 nuclear-powered American aircraft carriers are not the same as 11 Chinese destroyers. But even here, the gap is rapidly shrinking. In June 2022, China launched its third aircraft carrier called the Fujian. It's become China's largest warship. The aircraft carrier is scheduled to join the Navy by 2024. In this video, we'll talk more about the Fujian, comparing it to the epitome of U.S. power, the super aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford. And we'll also try to understand what are the prospects for the confrontation between the U.S. and Chinese navies, and how it all may end. Watch till the end, it'll be interesting. For a long time, China's military equipment and naval forces were not an exception to the Soviet legacy. The first Chinese aircraft carrier, Liaoning, is actually an unfinished Soviet aircraft carrier, Variag, which Ukraine sold with all the documentation to China in 1999 for a ridiculous $20 million. By the way, at that time, the Chinese leadership swore that no one would finish the ship and it'd be used as a floating hotel and entertainment center. For more convincing, the ship was purchased by a company from Macau, Chinese Las Vegas. This is how the first aircraft carrier appeared in the Celestial Empire, and then rapid progress followed. If the first Chinese aircraft carrier, Liaoning, was literally a Soviet-built ship, and the second, Shandong, became developed with the Chinese face, the Fujian could be considered the first aircraft carrier entirely built and designed by China. According to various sources, the construction of the ship began in 2015, 2016, or even 2017. First of all, the size of the aircraft carrier draws attention. If Shandong and Liaoning have a displacement of about 70,000 tons, the Fujian will have a displacement of up to 85,000 tons, which is less than the displacement of American aircraft carriers such as Nimitz and Gerald R. Ford, with their displacement of about 100,000 tons. Images from U.S. reconnaissance satellites show it to be about 320 meters or 1,050 feet long. This is about 13 meters or 43 feet shorter than the Gerald R. Ford. The Chinese ship also has a narrower flight deck. It's about 73 meters or 240 feet wide. In this respect, she's very similar to previous Chinese aircraft carriers. There may be logistical reasons for this, such as the size of the dry dock, or perhaps Chinese planners were satisfied with the width of current aircraft carriers. The Fujian is also expected to get an upgraded island, a turret structure that houses a command center for cockpit operations, as well as radar and communications equipment. In the images, the island looks shorter than previous Chinese aircraft carriers, but retains the single-level control tower. However, it'll have large phased array radars above it. It's like the Gerald R. Ford. The main difference from American aircraft carriers was the choice of power plant. The Chinese have abandoned nuclear reactors. They don't have the appropriate technology yet. But we think that the fourth Chinese aircraft carrier will be nuclear-powered. Either China itself will develop the nuclear reactor designs, or Russia will provide them to its geostrategic ally. What kind of propulsion system is on the Fujian? There's no exact data, but we'll reveal this question a little later. Now we'll say that the absence of a nuclear installation on board sharply reduces the autonomy of the aircraft carrier, as well as limits its capabilities. After all, only a nuclear reactor can give the ship a huge amount of electricity for the operation of all sorts of systems and units. For example, the Gerald R. Ford has 2 of its nuclear reactors, Bechtel A1B, which do not need to recharge fuel for all 50 years of service of the aircraft carrier, providing it with any range of sailing. In addition, their combined power of 1,400 megawatts is enough not only to turn the propellers of this 100,000-ton behemoth, but also to power all the ship's systems. And even about 300 kilowatts of power remain in reserve for future laser weapons. The Chinese aircraft carrier has no such luxury, and the range is limited, and instead of an excess of electricity, it's austerity. Unlike China's first 2 aircraft carriers, the Fujian will have catapults, 3 units, like the Gerald R. Ford, but 1 less than the Nimitz-class carriers. This will allow heavier payloads and more fuel to be launched, as well as larger aircraft with less thrust capability. The Chinese aircraft carrier is expected to carry J-15T deck fighters and J-15D electronic warfare aircraft. So far, China does not have a multi-role deck fighter of the FA-18EF Super Hornet level. It's pertinent to recall that back in 2021, the FA-18 Block 3 Super Hornet, the latest and most advanced version of the fighter, took to the skies for the first time. The production aircraft will receive, among other things, a new infrared search and tracking sensor, IRST, and a large touchscreen display in the cockpit. It has advanced onboard electronic equipment and can use almost the entire range of airborne weapons that are in the arsenal of the U.S. Navy. In turn, the only deck fighter of the Chinese Navy, Shenyang J-15, is a Chinese version of the Su-33. The basic version of these machines is the Soviet Su-27, which was not designed as a deck plane and is not very suitable for this role, if only because of its dimensions. At one time, the Asia Times reported that in China the aircraft is called a jumping fish for its inability to operate effectively from the deck of aircraft carriers. Also, U.S. intelligence agencies have counted at least 4 J-15 crashes with the overall low number of aircraft produced. It's pertinent to say in the future the basis of the U.S. Navy's deck aviation on par with the FA-18EF will be the latest generation F-35C. The fact that the machine belongs to the 5th generation conditionally does not cancel the fact that it's low observable, which gives it an advantage over Chinese deck fighters at least beyond the line of sight. According to rumors as well as photos from the web, China's creating its own low observable shipboard fighter FC-31, but so far the data on this aircraft is contradictory and often speculative. Now more about catapults. The Chinese have decided to use electromagnetic catapults like the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford, so they skip the stage of steam catapults at once. But it must be said that electromagnetic catapults are technically very complicated. And to this day, Gerald R. Ford is debugging them. Because of frequent breakdowns, former U.S. President Donald Trump said in 2019, "I will issue an executive order that steam catapults be used in the construction of new aircraft carriers." However, the point of no return has already been passed. As the media wrote in 2023, EMALS and the improved AAG air finisher provided 8,000 successful launches and landings of airplanes aboard the Gerald R. Ford. It should be assumed that neither the United States nor the Chinese will abandon the technology. However, the Celestial Empire will only have to overcome the difficulties that the Americans have already overcome. Or maybe Chinese intelligence will steal the secrets of electromagnetic catapults from the U.S. Having electromagnetic catapults requires a lot of electrical power on the ship, and since there's no nuclear reactor in Fujian, we can assume that the turbo-electric propulsion system using steam turbines will be used. The steam generated by the boilers drives the turbine generators, producing a current that powers the propeller drive motors, catapults, and other ship systems. For the past few decades, though, turbo-electric units have been somewhat neglected due to their greater complexity and weight compared to gas and steam turbines that turn propellers directly. However, the significant increase in electricity consumption on warships has renewed interest in them. This is especially true for aircraft carriers with electromagnetic catapults, which need powerful power supplies. China's new aircraft carrier will have only 2 elevators to elevator planes onto the deck, unlike the Gerald R. Ford, which has 3. Reducing the number of elevators has allowed the Fujian to have a larger usable deck area despite its narrower deck. But this can't be seen as a reasonable trade-off, as it'll take the Chinese longer to get the planes out of the hangar. In fact, the answer may lie in the Soviet legacy. The Fujian inherited its dual lift system directly from the Russian Admiral Kuznetsov class. Now let's summarize the new Chinese aircraft carrier. Fujian is significantly inferior to Gerald R. Ford in terms of sailing autonomy and cannot qualitatively modernize by installing laser weapons. It's slightly smaller in dimensions than the Gerald R. Ford. It has fewer elevators for aircraft, which can reduce the number of sorties. Also, a big advantage of the American aircraft carrier is the aircraft, the main strike force of this class of ships. So far, the Chinese J-15 is significantly inferior to the FA-18EF Super Hornet in terms of combat capabilities, and the Chinese have no analog of the F-35C at all. But China's not standing still. In 2021, the construction of the 4th aircraft carrier will begin, and it'll certainly be nuclear-powered. The following fact shows the pace of development of Chinese military fleet. For 5 years, starting from 2016 at the military shipyards of the Chinese-built warships, in total equal in tonnage to the entire Royal Navy of Great Britain or the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. By 2030, China will have 4 aircraft-carrying strike groups. Recently, the edition of Popular Mechanics, which reviews the forecasts of various analysts, published an article in which it stated that China will be able to equal the potential of its Navy with the U.S. Navy by 2030. The author of the material, Kyle Mizukami, pointed out that according to the hypothesis of the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, CSBA, if China manages to competently build a scheme of spending on the fleet, then in 8 years, starting in 2022, Beijing will build at least 2 aircraft carriers and 4 more submarines with ballistic missiles. This scenario assumes that the tonnage of the Chinese Navy will double over those years. In this regard, we have only one question. Do the U.S. authorities realize how this may end for their country? If a pro-American president has come to power in Taiwan as a result of elections, and the Chinese are now likely to start a war with Taiwan, realizing they are noticeably inferior to the U.S. in terms of their naval forces, but what will happen by 2030? Will the Chinese dragon then be afraid of the American eagle? Indeed, who will then dominate the Indo-Pacific region? The region, which as many experts suggest, will soon become the most economically powerful on the planet. It turns out that what's at stake now is nothing less than the future of Western civilization. And as in the good old days, the fate of the planet's leader will be decided by the Navy. And what's your opinion on this matter? Write about it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. Please also don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. And see you soon.